Welcome to the CAS-SAIA Careers event. My name is Henning Suhr and I'm the current country director of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung in South Africa.
A very warm welcome to all of you participating and attending this very first virtual careers evening that the South African Institute of International Affairs and the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung are organising. My name is Elizabeth Sideropoulos. I'm the Chief Executive of the South African Institute of International Affairs, and it's really a great pleasure to once again be partnering and hosting this event with the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung.
This time, for the first time, we have a virtual event, but I think it's a big advantage because we can reach out to speakers we would never had before.
And of course this year it's happening under extraordinary circumstances. But I think these circumstances have also created new opportunities for us to be able to reach out.
On behalf of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, I would like to extend a warm welcome wherever you are at the moment, may it be in South Africa or even anywhere else on the continent. The Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is a German political foundation. As Christian Democrats, we are guided by the Christian view of humanity. We stand for personal responsibility, justice and solidarity. And we are firmly committed to the liberal, representative democracy, rule of law and the social market economy, which is the main economic model in Central Europe. In South Africa, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is active since 1982. In particular, we work with political parties because we believe that there is only democracy when we have vibrant and stable political parties in place, which also reflect the will of the people. The cooperation with academic institutions is crucial. We acknowledge the need for academic freedom, and we also support and finance a lot of studies in different fields. Since many years, we maintain a very close partnership with the South African Institute of International Affairs.
The South African Institute of International Affairs is an international relations think tank focused on evidence-based policy making in the areas of foreign policy, particularly looking at the way in which South Africa and Africa engage with the world, in economic diplomacy, governance, global governance, and some of the international development challenges and sustainable development goals that are such a core component of the global environment in the 21st century.
It is an important link because SAIA explains current African affairs to other institutions worldwide.
Hi everybody! Hi everyone and welcome. My name is Alia Vaez and welcome to SAIA's annual careers event. A little bit about myself. I'm a research intern at the South African Institute for International Affairs. I'm based in the Cape Town office and at the Governance of African Resources program. I'm also a master's scholar of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Foundation for 2020. And as such, I'm studying towards my master's degree in international relations at the University of Cape Town. Joining me is my colleague Matthew.
Hello, I'm Matthew Wallenberg, and I'm also a 2020 Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Scholar, interning at SAIA's Governance of Africa's Resources program. I'm doing my research in political science at Stellenbosch University. Thank you.
Cool. This event is run annually in an effort to expose young South Africans completing secondary and tertiary education to opportunities, networks, and experience in the field of international relations, politics, and the broader social sciences. Usually this event is held in person, but due to COVID-19 and national safety regulations, we've moved the event online in hopes to deliver the same level of interaction, exposure, and opportunities. Before introducing the theme of the event, I'd like to alert all participants to an exciting competition we're running throughout the duration of this event until Sunday. Please click on the link in the sticky notes in the comment section on the right-hand side of your screen. Here you'll find a link to the competition where you stand a chance to win a copy of Election 2019 by Colette Schultz-Herzenberg and Robert Southall, or a copy of Roadmap for Sustainable Biofuels in Southern Africa by Oliver Ruppel. Okay, so onto the theme of the event. The theme for this event is the importance of social sciences and humanities in a post-COVID world. While we've yet to see what a post-COVID world looks like, this theme is particularly important for young students and graduates across the humanities and social sciences to consider as we must place ourselves in the new normal. This consideration has often left students and young graduates evaluating their education and work prospects, asking questions like, what is virtual employability? Are fields within humanities and the social sciences still relevant or in demand today? And how have conventional workplaces and employment opportunities changed as a result of COVID-19? Our team have invited a number of highly experienced and knowledgeable speakers to begin to address some of these questions through sharing their work and life experience in various fields. Throughout the program, I encourage all participants to engage with speakers and their presentation content via the comment section. After all speakers have finished, there will be a chance for speakers to answer questions and engage with participants. Okay, so moving swiftly on to our much anticipated speakers, I have the great pleasure of introducing our first speaker to you. With an extensive list of achievements and involvement in public service and the field of international relations, Ghaleeb Jeppie is currently the Chief Director of International Relations at the Department of Higher Education and Training in South Africa. He was educated at the Universities of Western Cape and London. Mr. Jeppie is a recipient of the Canon Collins Educational Trust Scholarship and was also a student on the Educational Policy Research and Social Change in South Africa, or the RESA program in London. He is a member of various national and international working committees, including the South African National Commission for UNESCO and the Center for Chinese Studies at the University of Stellenbosch. Please give a virtual round of applause for our first speaker, Mr. Ghaleeb Jeppie.
Thanks very much, Alia. And ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Molweni to those in the Western Cape. Bonjour to the ones that do speak French, or smattering thereof. Students, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to everyone. Allow me to express my appreciation to SIA for this invitation. The COVID-19 pandemic is unprecedented and given rise to challenges that governments across the world are struggling to deal with. Over the last 3 months, the world has changed dramatically. This deadly virus has caused a public health crisis, created uncertainty, and put a stop to productive economic activity. Unlike other countries, we are at the early stages of opening up our economy in the midst of the peak of the pandemic. International travel restrictions are still in place in many countries in the world, with thousands of workers and students in distress in foreign countries. Our only chance to win this fight is to slow the spread and give our health sector the necessary space and the World Health Organization the resources, unlike some countries, to care for those who need it. In this talk, I wish to share with you my experiences of working in the field of international relations in education, and to share some insights on the impact of the pandemic on the execution of our international relations remit. Let me also express appreciation for the fact that you've chosen a social science theme for this year's event, as the discourse of the pandemic has largely focused on the health sciences. The Ministerial Advisory Committee responsible for advising government on the pandemic is now including members of the Humanities and Social Sciences community to advise on the social and behavioral consequences of the pandemic. Globalization has been around for a very long time, and the information technology has literally shrunk the world, making everything and everyone more accessible for a large number, but not necessarily for all people. Globalization has brought with it inequalities within and between nations. I was born on the Cape Flats and schooled in the working class neighborhood of Steenberg, some 20 kilometers from where I grew up. During the student struggles of the 1980s, I left South Africa for exile and would later go on to study in London. My interest in international matters really started at home from an early age, where we were socialized into reading, writing to pen pals in different countries, and collecting postage stamps from all over the world. To our young students, I hope you know what postage stamps look like and handwritten letters actually look like. One could say I'm an accidental internationalist, but this cultural capital would eventually inform my field of study and occupation, which included a brief stint as a high school teacher. In 1995, I was appointed just after the elections of 94. I was appointed to the department as the deputy director and got promoted within time. I have served for 25 years and have developed expertise in the field of educational diplomacy. One of my very first responsibilities in the Department of Education was to craft the UNESCO National Commission Constitution of South Africa, as we had just rejoined the multilateral world in 1995. South Africa's readmission into the international community in 1994 led to the country establishing diplomatic relations with various other countries and securing membership of continental and international institutions, rooting itself firmly in Africa and amongst the countries of the South. As our foreign policy began taking effect, the department was inundated with offers of support from foreign governments, bilateral and multilateral agencies such as the United Nations, UNESCO, the OAU, AU now, SADC, Commonwealth, and so on, with requests from counterpart ministries and universities for the formalization of educational cooperation and official development support. In fact, the first few years, requests for collaboration were arriving virtually on a daily basis from across the world. In 95, the department, as with many other government ministries such as health, culture, science, trade, environment, to mention a few, started setting up directorates for international relations to facilitate partnerships and participation in international fora. The work of international relations was no longer the preserve of the foreign ministry. The old diplomacy started giving way to a new diplomatic discourse. The foreign ministry coordinated the departments, but the promotion of relations were left to individual departments at national level. The benefits that departments accrued from their international participation led some of them to appoint attachés to foreign countries and multilateral agencies. My section was charged with the coordination of the department's relations with foreign governments, bilateral and multilateral agencies, education and training institutions on educational diplomacy, and to manage a very complex development cooperation and educational environment, in addition to providing the protocol services. The first decade of democracy was a relentless period as we managed approximately 24 donor agreements and numerous partnership agreements. Many of the foreign representatives also approached our universities and agencies, statutory bodies, offering a variety of programs such as technical assistance, student and academic exchanges, joint research, scholarships, conferences, as well as short-term sabbaticals and capacity building programs to our representatives. By the start of the millennium, new forms of partnerships that were not dependent on aid emerged. For example, some of the foreign embassies were now beginning to place trade representatives or trade attachés instead of educational envoys in Pretoria. South Africa was now being classified as a middle-income country. Their representatives were now essentially going to be selling the Northern Hemisphere institutions and educational consultancy services to us in the South. It was no longer about partnerships. The overall aim of our collaboration is to afford our policymakers, students, academics, lecturers and administrators access to and participate in the international exchange and production of knowledge. South Africa has approximately 12,000 students studying across the globe, either privately or on various scholarships. At the onset of the pandemic, the department, with the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, repatriated hundreds of students who were in distress or stranded. All our returning students were placed into quarantine. Arrangements were also made for the thousands of foreign students studying in South Africa, and we have close on to 60,000 who could not return to their home countries on the eve of the lockdown. The pandemic has clearly demonstrated that the nations of the world are profoundly interconnected and interdependent. This period must be used to identify and promote concrete international partnerships in the health sciences, humanities, to combat this crisis and to support economic recovery. But whilst this crisis unfolds, the world is not necessarily focusing on other ongoing crises, such as the plight of refugees, the annexation of parts of the Palestinian West Bank by the Israeli forces in direct violation of international law and Security Council resolutions, and the food crisis in the Yemen, which is exacerbated by the pandemic. There can be no denying that the importance of multilateral work of the United Nations and the African Union during this period is critical. I've been asked to address a couple of issues, some of which the questions are of a higher grade, and so I'm going to attempt to look at some of these aspects very briefly. The psychological impacts of COVID on education and communications. We have now entered a new age of dealing with each other. What was the norm, where people gathered in spaces to meet, negotiate, attend diplomatic receptions where we network, all to nurture relationships and arrive at solutions, has been put on hold. Face-to-face meetings and teaching at our universities abruptly came to a halt. As social beings, we thrive on human contact, and relationships are normally forged and maintained in this way. This period has depersonalized our engagements, as our relationships are being mediated online through digital platforms. While social distancing does reduce the infection rate, the art of diplomacy has largely revolved around human interaction, and this will require rethinking going forward. All universities have developed institutional plans to support students utilizing a range of methodologies. The scramble for gadgets has started amongst university students already. Whilst the pandemic had detrimental effects on the planned academic calendars, universities are collaborating in research across boundaries to fight the disease. There has been significant amount of research, innovation, and engagement in support of government efforts to curb the spread of COVID-19. You may ask, how do I choose a career, especially with a high unemployment rate in South Africa, and the fact that certain jobs are already saturated with high numbers of graduates? We need to rethink what the new requirements are going to be for the international relations practitioner. There would be a need for complete mindset change. If I was a Sangoma reading the bones I would bet that we will still require more foreign analysts, educational analysts, science specialists, immigration specialists, international law advisors, foreign language experts, translators, interpreters, to serve our national interests. Government and the private sector will require competent people with the expertise in trade, economics, marketing, education, and science. We will still want to exchange the best practices learned in a global context to improve our systems and contribute to the development of an equitable world. Reading widely, and I want to emphasize reading widely beyond our course material and developing an appreciation for the other is definitely an advantage in how you engage and develop your network. Being cosmopolitan in one's thinking and orientation is important in this field. South Africa has many highly developed public universities and colleges, as well as premier research institutions, which serves the country's advanced physical and socio-economic infrastructure, all of whom have international partnerships and employ international practitioners. The same would apply with the think tanks and advisory services agencies that are looking for young and dynamic people who have solid research skills and who are able to design specific solutions. A definite advantage is possessing niche area studies expertise and foreign language capabilities. Use your time as a student to become an expert. Become the best in your area, even if it focuses on a far-flung area in the Darfur or Outer Mongolia. Become that expert. Let's not worry about the BMWs for the time being. The workplace will shift drastically post-COVID-19 from the norm of being physically present in the office to working remotely or virtually. Your in-tray in the office will be empty, but your inbox in the smart machine will be flooded with mail. Employers will seek dynamic individuals who will be able to cope and adapt to the new ways of doing things. In this era of COVID-19, all the mentioned careers can be done remotely to a great extent, as they involve research, analysis, and writing well. And where a meeting is required, virtual tools will be used. Career advisors are readying themselves to support students to navigate their studies and to make decisions on changes in the academic year and their future careers. Let me conclude by saying that the department views its international relations as an important means of professional exchange, learning from the experiences of other countries and enlisting the support needed to speed up the process of transformation. Moreover, COVID-19 has reminded us how much we are dependent on one another and the need each other across the globe. You, as the young and aspiring internationalist, are the generation that will be the first cohort of graduates and interns who would live through the global pandemic in our lifetime, which has disrupted learning and working patterns. You will be the ones to navigate and show us how working in new spaces is going to unfold. I want to wish you well, and I want to assure you also that you are far more prepared to deal with the smart machines, the virtual people that you meet, and virtual smart people out there, as I belong to a slightly earlier generation where we are less smart. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was an incredible presentation, just because we got to see not only your quite inspiring career trajectory, but as you moved through your career, South Africa's diplomatic profile and kind of multilateral outlook was also touched on, and its evolution as well. While I appreciate your Sangoma analogy, it definitely provided a positive outlook on social science careers in the future, and more notably on lessons for people like myself on becoming both dynamic in the workplace, but also an expert. So I hope our participants took as much away from the presentation as I did, and I encourage participants as well to re-engage with speakers throughout this program with questions that will be dealt with towards the end of our program. Our next speaker is Ms. Inka Schomer. Ms. Schomer is currently a senior gender and energy advisor at the World Bank Group. She has led the Energy Sector Management Assistance Program, Gender and Social Inclusion Program, as well as the World Bank's Africa Gender and Energy Program. She is currently leading projects on gender inequality and social inclusion in Ethiopia, Burundi, and across the Pacific region. Prior to joining the World Bank, Ms. Schomer worked on climate and carbon finance projects and renewable energy sector programs, the Climate Investment Funds and Camco Clean Energy Consulting South Africa. She holds an MSc in Environmental Change and Management from the University of Oxford and an honours degree from the University of Cape Town in Economics and Environmental Management. Please join me in welcoming Ms. Inka Schomer.
Hi, big virtual hello, thank you to Ghaleeb for the overview of the career and also just the challenges being faced in South Africa. Just wanted to check that you all can hear me. Yep. Okay. So I'm a predominantly science background person who's very much found their home in gender equality and social issues. So I will be speaking to that today. I have prepared a presentation just because I thought maybe it'd be nice to share some content of the work that I do. So I'm just going to pull that up now. And let's see if it works. Is that up?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're good. Okay, I assume we are set. So I have an atypical career in the infrastructure sector, and I'm probably going to resonate with those that are often don't feel like they fit into a specific area. And as the speaker said before, very much working in a niche area, and also agree that there's so much scope to kind of find those spaces and places. I am very passionate about gender equality issues. I don't think we have 217 years to really address those gender gaps in terms of economic participation of women, in terms of care burden, etc. And of course, this is, very much enmeshed with other issues around Black Lives Matters, racial inequality, etc. So I'll be speaking to a certain lens, but just that is the broader framing that we also see this work in. So just, I had, when people ask me even today, what is a 5-year, what do you want to do in 5 years? I honestly don't know. I've always been so interested in what's right in front of me. Went to the German school in Cape Town, and then started at UCT and just thought I was going to have a career in environmental management. Environmental issues are still very close to my heart, and luckily I found my way into the infrastructure sector, and I'm working on solar, geothermal, and projects that I believe are good for the planet and the people. Did my master's, as mentioned, on solar water heaters. I looked at the context of South Africa on how we could harness renewable energy to really address suppressed demand issues in our country. We've got, huge challenges there in terms of energy consumption and other issues. Moved into private sector consulting in Johannesburg. One thing that I found quite difficult in private sector consulting is that you get put on a project, you deliver something, and then you get removed. So that was a conflict within me, and that led me to reach out and apply for work at the World Bank, and I landed in a renewable energy fund, which I helped manage, and by surprise went to a panel where a group of individuals were talking about gender equality and why it matters in the energy sector. I heard them speak, and within a few weeks, I resigned from my previous position and started working on these issues. I was based in Senegal for a few years with the World Bank, and from there really got to see how the issues on social inclusion and gender equality play out in different cultural contexts with, you know, different languages, different religious contexts. And that was really fascinating as a South African. I think what I've noticed is that we can be very often inward looking because we're a big country. We have a lot going on. And then sometimes, you know, what's forgotten is this broader activity in certain regions. A funny anecdote is I think my family thought Dakar was landlocked, but I was like, no, I'm on a peninsula. So, yeah, have found in the last 2 years I've been based in Ethiopia. Highly recommend that to anyone, but I'll speak more broadly about those issues. But I wanted to take a moment to speak to you about why these issues matter. And I would like to encourage both women and men to engage in this area. It really, for me, it's personal. And I think there's just no way we can develop on an individual level as economies, as constitutions, as democracies, etc., without these issues being addressed. So just broadly, I know a lot of you are studying international development, so I'm sure you're familiar with the World Bank, but I didn't know too much about it when I started working there. Based in DC, Washington, the White House is just a few steps further down, and it has 170 different nationalities represented in the staff, and I've absolutely loved that. If you want to know about agriculture and, you know, the Himalayas, you will find someone and that person will know what's going on. There are offices in 130 locations. So the World Bank offices in South Africa are the private sector arm is in Johannesburg, and then the public sector arm is in Pretoria. So also worth thinking about those opportunities there. And then there's country offices in Malawi and in a lot of African countries, and some country offices focus on different regions. In summary, it's a bank. It lends to the extremely poor. There are many, many good articles, and I'm sure papers that you've read that would point to the issues around what the World Bank does, and I encourage you to reflect and look at that too. And I personally do that quite a lot too in the work that I do. So just briefly, yeah, we don't have a society that is gender equal. There is not one country in the world that has achieved this in terms of laws. There's a few that have gotten close, Iceland, but we see systematic issues being addressed, and they really impact our GDP. And now with the COVID crisis, and this is something that's really been a lot of debate has gone into this. We're seeing the exacerbation of gaps that we had before. We know women are in the healthcare sector, they're overrepresented there. They are caregivers. They're working minimum wage more often than higher waged employees, which predominantly are men. They really have a care burden. So when schools close and kindergartens close and care facilities close, it's really that triple burden that's really now resting on a lot of households on women. And there are also issues around job losses. And yeah, so just to mention, there are those linkages, and we're also seeing issues around maternal health. So for instance, we're seeing an underinvestment or continuation of maternal health electrification. We also know when families invest, they tend to underinvest in young girls. So if we're losing 1 or 2 school years, we really have, we need to watch out that we don't lose the gains that we've made in terms of primary and secondary education globally. Why does this matter? From my personal perspective, and any development professional can have a think about this, but I have to say that with a lot of people that I work with, this still hasn't really sunk in. So a lot of my work is around pitching the case for it. So enhancing development outcomes, and we know that project design and the way we, let's take a bus system in Cape Town. Are we thinking about the mobility constraints and the mobility needs of women versus men? Are we thinking about the transport nodes and the lighting issues and the safety issues that different groups in income and also in gender would face navigating the city? Then there's a moral imperative. We don't always have the business case. Quite often we work in the public sector. A lot of the public sector institutions that I work with don't have a positive balance sheet. So people should feel safe in the work environment. They shouldn't have to face sexual harassment. They shouldn't be excluded. And we know that from our research, there's about a threshold of about 30% for someone to feel like they belong. And that could be across race, gender, ethnicity, etc. So that's something important to remember. Risk management, we've gone through a lot of thinking on this in terms of issues around gender-based violence at construction sites, land compensation processes. If you don't have formal rights to land and you're building a dam or you're putting in a road or you're converting land from pastoral land to other land, who's in those negotiations, who's in those discussions, and who's being compensated? And I think, South Africa has been amazing in terms of leading the way on these issues, and we often actually draw on case studies, everything from what Eskom has been looking into in terms of fostering young female engineers, to some of the issues around the independent power procurement process and bringing in those equity issues into the bidding process. Just looking at my time. So what kind of work can you do at the World Bank? The mix of work that I do and most people do is they focus on data, they generate knowledge, they work on projects. And when I say projects, I really mean projects that can be loans or grants to country governments that are designed over 2 to 3 years. So you're really intensely working with your counterparts, which is the Ministry of Finance, Ministries of Education, or Ministries of Energy. In my case, I've worked mainly with infrastructure entities who would like to develop renewable energy or would like to build roads, etc. So these are kind of your counterparts. And then you do a lot of work around partnerships. You work with development banks, and you try do a lot of knowledge sharing. So if Kenya is leading on childcare provision, you try bring that expertise to other regions to say and exchange those ideas. And you also tap into a lot of global networks. This is just some of examples of some of the data work. If there are people that really want to go into data, we have a large bunch of economists running around doing a lot of that work. But there's also a lot of social scientists, and they are doing a lot of the qualitative work around, community participation and ensuring that our projects really meet the needs of the vulnerable. I work a lot on energy access surveys and women's employment data. Briefly, piece of advice for all of those thinking about entering postmasters: it's very important to convert your thinking and your work into actual knowledge. This often is quite a treacherous process if anyone's done any journals, but this is a fantastic way to show that you're a thought leader, that you're thinking through the information, and that you can distill knowledge. One fun piece we recently did was a calendar on looking at gender equality issues, and that was just one of those fun pieces where we worked with comic artists around the world to illustrate sometimes a very abstract concept into actual ideas. I'm going to skip this slide and speak to you about what I really love doing with most of my time, which is designing projects from the bottom up. This is work that I've done for the last 4 years in Ethiopia, just to make more tangible what this gender equality work actually involves. We have an over $2 billion portfolio. I'm getting a lot of feedback. I don't know why. Ethiopia ranks 109 out of 143 countries in terms of the magnitude of scope of gender disparities. We see an underinvestment in women's healthcare. We see early childhood marriage. And we see really tangible separation of the kind of work that women and men do in the country. So through a long 2-year process, we designed a program with the Ministry of Finance and the Ethiopia Electric Utility to tackle the occupational sex segregation, to build childcare facilities in the utilities for the 22,000 employees they have. We address gender-based violence issues, and I might show a video if I have time, but no worries if we don't. It's all captured in online blogs and videos as well. And what was really fantastic through this process is a lot of talking to educational institutions up to the minister's level, embedding it in national policy making, and then actually ensuring that the government has the budget to do this. Because I think one thing that's underestimated is how much money it takes to undress the inequalities of the past. And I think that should be remembered. Systems are strong. Change. I'm just going to check in if there's time for a video, but otherwise I will just wrap up. I can't see anyone because okay, so I'm just going to leave that video with you. Check it out, have a look. It basically focuses on the gender-based violence work that we've been doing in the energy sector in Ethiopia. A Ministry of Women's Affairs data showed us that there's 48% of women in the Ethiopian public sector have experienced gender-based violence. This includes economic, sexual, verbal, etc. So there's just a real spectrum there. And the utility took steps forward, and it was a really fantastic process to look at the drivers of these issues and talk about controversial issues. Does religion and those cultural structures perpetuate gender-based violence? Can they be helpful entry points, etc.? And we work a lot with large contractors who a lot of the time come from other countries. So briefly, some reflections on a somewhat dream career for me, but not something I could have imagined 15 years ago when I made choices. I studied everything from oceanography to conservation and political science, and I never knew how this was going to add up. And somehow I found myself in a place where I can be a feminist, I can work on infrastructure issues, but I can also go into communities and talk about what the energy access needs are. What would you like to do in terms of biomass? What are the crops that you want to harvest? And what are your kind of goals in terms of income? I think careers are evolving faster than career advice is. I found this already when I was at UCT. So it's important to remember that a lot of careers aren't actually out there, and they're not advertised well. So there's really niche areas developing. So yeah, everyone needs to be an engineer or an economist, and that's fantastic and exciting. Figure out what environment you thrive in. I've realized that I love living in different countries. I love working with diverse colleagues from different countries. I find that exciting. Someone else might find it more exciting to be based in a certain place and really make roots in a certain region. So that's also really important. Thinking about your ideal day, I really enjoy that I get to do large reports over many years, that I get to work on projects and I don't need to pull out of them quickly. I think I'm not that suited for a business consulting career or some, where I might not be the perfect diplomat either, because there you have to kind of juggle a lot of issues and think about them as they change swiftly. I really like being a technical expert and plodding along over the years as we develop mini grids in a remote community. Get into the field. Don't just read things. Don't believe what people say. Speak to the people that are being affected by a project. Hear their aspirations. There's nothing more important than to hear from people in terms of what they want. So I'm one of the few people always on the work trips that gets to go into the field, where I make a point of getting a car and going out and really making sure that I work with my local colleagues to do that. Yeah, and then you will face work-life challenges that nobody will teach you about. I've had to make quite difficult decisions in terms of partnerships and relationships along the way. And it's important to keep talking to people about how to navigate that. And yeah. And you will take a long time to get good at something. I remember the impatience around this, and I'm still got so much more to learn, but you will get there. You just need to, yeah, keep applying yourself and catching up. It's a long time, surprisingly. And burnout is real. Pick the institutions and the people you work for very carefully. I'm definitely not a role model in this regard. I work very long hours and long days, and it's something that I'm trying to tackle at the moment. But yeah, so that's all from me.
Career possibilities and opportunities that exist for scholars. Your presentation also showed the importance of cultivating interdisciplinary knowledge in fields like IR, and that youth need to be bold when looking for spaces where they can best influence or better affect the world in its future, either domestically or internationally. You also showed our participants the explanatory power of intersectional gender studies in explaining and solving complex socio-political and economic issues that persist in the world today. So thank you for that. Moving on, please help me in welcoming our next speaker, Markus Korhonen, an associate in the Political and Security Risk Analysis team at Signal Risk Management. He previously worked as a political science lecturer at the Universities of Cape Town and Stellenbosch and at Webster University's campus in Accra. He also worked as a writer for Africa Check, the continent's first fact-checking organization. Mr. Korhonen holds an MSc by Research in African Studies from the University of Edinburgh and MA in Politics and International Relations from the University of Aberdeen. Cool.
Thank you for the introduction, Matthew, and hello to everyone listening in. I'll begin by kind of briefly letting you know what kind of work it is that I'm currently doing, a slightly different perspective perhaps from the previous two presenters, as I work in the private sector. I'll then just say a few words about how I got to where I am and finish off by relating some of this to the specific themes of the event around the COVID pandemic. First of all, Matthew, I work for a company called SRM. Signal Risk is one of our competitors, but no matter. SRM is a global risk and intelligence consultancy. Our headquarters are in London, but we also have offices in Cape Town, Rio, Hong Kong, Washington, and New York. Very broadly speaking, what we do is to help our clients by providing them with intelligence on the risks that they face in their various operating environments. And when things do go wrong, which they inevitably do, we are in the crisis management sector after all, we support them in the response to those crises. The work can involve a variety of different services, including corporate or business intelligence, something that you might have come across in looking at possible career options. That's things like investigations into clients' potential business partners or due diligence investigations. Also looking at issues like anti-money laundering compliance and various services around deal advisory. The second broad grouping under the risk management portfolio is related to cybersecurity. This is pretty self-explanatory, but here our cyber team works in providing assessments on cybersecurity risks. They do ethical hacking, penetration testing or phishing testing, as well as cyber incident responses, things like cyber extortion. And then finally, there's the crisis management side of the business, which relates most to physical security risk analysis. So we do things like ongoing threat monitoring, running training or mock exercises, or assisting in responses to kidnapping and extortion incidents. And this is the side of the business that I'm involved in. So I work at the Cape Town office here, and I manage a team that works on the analysis of political and security risks. And as a team, we're responsible for producing daily content on a variety of global security incidents. We also support a major insurance company in their underwriting decisions by providing them with threat intelligence on a variety of global issues. We also produce regular thought leadership articles for publication, either on our own bulletins that we produce or in other publications, and also contribute to other crisis management work within the company. So one of the things, for example, that the team here in Cape Town does is to provide analytical support during kidnapping cases. From a sort of day-to-day point of view, what does it look like? Well, the part of the business that I'm in focuses on, for the most part, on risk related to two broad categories. One is political violence, and the other is related to travel security. So the first one, we're talking here about things like war and terrorism, civil unrest, and so on, while the second focuses on issues like crime or kidnapping and extortion. And really what our job is in these instances is to provide information for our clients that helps them to navigate those threats. So just as an example, if you think about different information needs and different practical security measures that organizations might require, think, for example, about a shipping operator that's port calling in Libya versus a high-end jewelry manufacturer that's hosting an exhibition in Mexico City. Now, both of those operating environments are potentially quite challenging, but in very, very different ways. And this is why advice cannot be given generically. It has to be tailored for the client's requirements. So in order to do that, we need to be able to assess and analyze the threats that are present in each of these operating environments. We need to think very closely and carefully about how those threats relate to the client in particular. And given what we know about their profile and planned operations, we then need to write up a report justifying our findings and potentially offer an outlook on how the threat will develop over time. As you can imagine, the work can be quite varied. It can be fast-paced. We don't have the luxury often of kind of thinking and pondering about issues for weeks at a time when the situation is live. So we often have to deliver quite quickly, and you never really know what you're going to get when you're walking through the door at the beginning of the day, which I find quite a fascinating aspect of working in the risk management industry. One of the things that I've been asked to spend a little bit of time on today is talking about how I ended up in the job or the career that I'm in now. As some of the previous speakers have pointed out, for me as well, it hasn't been a straight path. Some of it has been circumstance, some of it has been timing, some of it has been luck, and only some of it has been the right skill set or the right degree. And that's, I think, quite an important thing to bear in mind when you start looking for a job or a career. And I'll come back to that last point in a minute. When I was a master's student, I actually had very little idea of what I wanted to do. I had very little idea about what kind of jobs existed that I could do. I only had vague ideas, something international, something interesting, something that lets me put my degree to use. And many of those listening in might be in a similar place. And to be honest, from my point of view, I think that's fine. There's something wrong with you if you know exactly what you want to do at 20. Or perhaps, let me put it a little bit more generously, if you think you know exactly what you're going to be doing at 20, you're probably wrong. My suggestion then from this is to try different things. It took me quite a while to figure out in the first place a number of jobs and careers that I didn't want. But in that process, it really helped me to shape my own ideas about what kind of work and what kind of industry I did actually want to be involved in. And I don't look at that as time wasted. And numerous studies have shown that diversity in the workplace in terms of sex or race or expertise or age or whatever tends to create better outcomes for the company. For instance, if diverse viewpoints are considered, it makes companies better at managing risk. And from what I've seen, I'd also say that diversity in your own experience tends to get you to more interesting places. Because what seems at the time inconsequential or boring or hard work for not enough pay, they all contribute to making you a better candidate, to making a better analyst, a better manager or researcher, or whatever it is that you end up doing. Why does diversity achieve this? Well, I think that to a degree in both instances, what you're doing is that you're pooling information, you're pooling experience from a broader base. So the decisions or the assessments aren't made along a very narrow perspective. And that's probably why you end up with more accurate and better outcomes. So my relatively varied work experiences, whether it's from academia or journalism or a brief career in the military during my national service, or even the various manual labor jobs that I had as a student, all contribute something to my overall ability to problem solve, to manage people, to analyze information, and so on. And it also means that I have a pretty broad network to lean on. And networks matter. You never know how and when a casual connection will reappear. So generally, it's a good idea to be nice to everyone. I said a few moments ago that your skill set to a degree won't necessarily determine whether you get a particular job or not. It's true, but you do need a skill set to eventually get hired. And here's the thing. Skills are as important as, if not in some cases more important than, knowledge. It's great to become an expert at something, but for a lot of organizations, it's also really important that you're then able to apply that expertise in ways that help them do what they're trying to achieve. Now, particularly as humanities students or humanities graduates, we need to think about the skills that we can develop and demonstrate to a potential employer. What do you know how to do? Can you do statistical analysis? Can you speak foreign languages? Can you research, analyze, and write well? Can you write a proposal? Those are the sorts of questions that I think can be quite helpful to ask yourself. Because while you're students, you can also address a lot of those answers if they happen to be no. At least in the commercial sector, these are the types of things that matter. And that's why I have as colleagues not only social scientists, but lawyers, former police officers, former soldiers, journalists, chartered accountants, etc. We all have very different knowledge bases, very different expertise, if you will, in our various areas. But in previous careers, what we've done is we've developed a set of transferable skills that mean that we can work successfully on projects together. So it's really worth your while to take an additional short course on stats, or write an article for publication, or take up a temp job at an office or at a restaurant. Because not only do you learn quite a lot in the process, you're able to build a CV that shows that you can do more than debate political theories. And unfortunately, most employers will want that. One of the big lessons that I've learned during my career journey relates to how you then market those skills. After about 5 or 6 years of working as a university lecturer, I wanted to change what I was doing. I wanted to change course, and it took me quite a while to decide on firstly where I wanted to go. But then once I'd kind of found that, it also took a while to complete the transition. Remember, part timing, part luck, part circumstance, and all that. After looking around and reflecting on my interests, thinking about the skill set that I had, I decided that I could market myself as a political risk practitioner. Now, because I was pivoting my career, one of the things that I realized that I needed to do was to convince potential employers of my transferable skills. And perhaps initially I wasn't overt enough in advertising what those skills were, or my CV didn't demonstrate them prominently enough. In South Africa in particular, I think many employers look too closely at formal qualifications and direct experience in a sector. I think that's a mistake, because as I mentioned, diversity I think is quite important to take into account, but that's the reality that we have to deal with. With the time that remains, I'll touch on a couple of the sub-themes for this year's event, namely the question of post-COVID workplaces and the employment opportunities for international affairs grads. Not that it's necessarily limited to them. At SRM, we were quite fortunate when the pandemic emerged and lockdowns started happening, or the various restrictions started to be imposed, in that the company had previously invested heavily in the necessary hardware and software and the policies and processes that enabled working from home for all staff, with actually very few glitches when it came to it. At the beginning of lockdown, we heard stories of companies, clients, competitors frantically running around town trying to buy up all the laptops they could get their hands on, and desperately trying to set up the networks and communication systems that would enable them to operate when everybody started working from their living rooms. And for us, it was pretty fortunate that we could just pretty much carry on as normal. Now, why am I talking about all this? I recognize that there's a recession pretty much the world over, and the economic impacts of the pandemic are going to lag behind the sort of medical consequences of it. But that being said, when companies do begin to hire staff, you may find yourself in a relatively better position than before the pandemic. I need to unpack that a little bit. As we've continued working from home and engaged with our clients, we've seen how physical presence in the same room has taken a back seat. And what was considered such an essential element of successful and productive engagement just hasn't been an option. And actually, we're managing with it just fine. I think a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, a lot of people are noticing that you can do it. Universities are seeing that too, that provided that you have the correct setup, it's possible to have virtual classes and do it successfully. There are challenges, of course. But just as a brief example, in the past week or two, I've had client engagements locally, but also in the US, Hong Kong, Canada, and the UK. And other than some time zone considerations, it really hasn't made any difference that the meetings have been virtual. My takeaway is this: it will probably become more and more common that companies disperse their staff and hire remotely. Twitter, for example, has already said that none of its employees have to return to the office ever. And they won't be the last company to take that position. SRM is currently looking at different options, but certainly one that's being seriously considered is a partial work from home, that we'd have some days in the office and some days at home. Particularly as social science grads, a lot of the careers that people listening into this are likely to pursue, I think, are cerebral rather than physical, and don't really require equipment much more special than a laptop and a phone. And what that means is that you will potentially have a much wider pool of employers to consider. Conversely, employers will perhaps look to broaden their talent pool by hiring remotely rather than always locally. There's, of course, quite a lot of uncertainty to this, and it doesn't remove the reality that you still need to be a good candidate. So as a last point before I finish, if I were to offer you some advice related to employment opportunities in the field of international affairs or risk management for that matter, it's to think about the concrete ways that you can develop or demonstrate some of the skills that you have. When you leave university, if you think about it, you're also transitioning or pivoting in your career. You're moving from being a student to being an employee. And your task in that process is to show that you're worth the money, that you bring skills, that you bring abilities with you, that you can help the company be more profitable, you can help the research unit generate valuable knowledge, you can help the government department deliver on its mandate to improve people's lives. So I think while the pandemic might permanently change some of the ways in which we work, particularly in terms of the physical environment, I don't see that it will result in any kind of paradigm shift to society or to the economy. And to echo some of the comments that were made by the previous speakers, ultimately, people, companies, organizations, and states will retain the same requirements for goods and services, for information, and for expertise. And I hope that that's where you all come in. So thank you.
Dale.
Thank you for that highly informative presentation, Mr. Korhonen. Thank you for providing us with a private sector perspective and for testifying to the career prospects for those seeking to enter into the intelligence gathering sector or risk. Your career speaks to the changing nature of IR as a discipline and practice in the information age. I also like that you added that it's all right to be unsure of where exactly you're going to end up, and that sometimes one needs to experiment and tinker before settling. I also agree and echo that skills are more important than knowledge, and that networking ought to become a way of life, and that one's degree and specialization ultimately aren't the only things that matter. So thank you. We move now to our last speaker, Asanda Ngoasheng, the Managing Director of Newvoices South Africa and a Research Associate at the Centre for Rights and Justice at the University of Sussex. She lectures in a Co-Creating Across Difference course under the Cape Higher Education Consortium. Ms. Ngoasheng holds an MA in International Relations from the University of the Witwatersrand. She also works as a freelance political analyst and has been published by ENCA and News 24. Notably, Ms. Ngoasheng is a former Konrad Adenauer Stiftung scholar and a Clive Manel Media Fellowship recipient. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, so let me just fix myself. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the invite. And I'm somebody who's very passionate about youth development and about making sure that young people have access to information. So it was important for me to be part of this. So in terms of my presentation, I was going to go, I'm going to diverge a little bit from the previous speakers, in that I'm just going to focus purely on my career and my own career projection and how I went from being a research intern to the current positions that I now hold, with the hope that that'll help you understand how, first of all, a career is not linear, and while you may plan, it's not always going to happen the way that you planned it. So yeah. So the first thing I want to say really is that before I started studying, I first wanted to become a fashion designer because I had been doing art at school, and I figured that I could bring out some amazing line of clothing, which of course my father then said there's no way his daughter is gonna sit around drawing clothes for a living. And although I had gotten an entrance into a horticulture school of design in Cape Town, I had to very quickly put paid to those dreams. And so then I went with my second career option, which was journalism. And then I had to have a negotiation with my father about where I would study this journalism. I had been accepted to the Cape Peninsula University of Technology in Cape Town, which ironically I ended up being a lecturer in journalism for at a later stage. I had also been accepted to Wits University to study journalism as well, and I even had a place or an acceptance in the residence. And my father said, no child of his is going to go to Joburg, especially because when I finished matric, I was only 17, so I only turned 18 in the year of my first year. And I must admit, having gone to Joburg at the age of 22, I think I agree with my father. I probably wouldn't have gotten my degree if I had gone to Joburg much earlier. So kudos to anybody that can finish a degree in Johannesburg with all its distractions and fun places. So how did I end up to being a SIA and a Konrad Adenauer Stiftung scholarship holder? I started my career studying journalism at Rhodes University. I basically registered for what's known as a B.Journ at the time, which was a four-year degree where at the end you come out with a journalism degree with a specialization. There was the option of coming out with a BA journalism, and in the end I came out with a BA journalism and politics. And the reason for this was because at Rhodes University they had a very interesting way of bringing people into the next year, where for every single year that you were in the journalism course, you were made to apply. So you had to write a motivation letter that said, why should you put in the next year? And so I made it through the first year, I made it through the third year, but somehow I couldn't make it into the fourth year. And at the end of my third year, I was actually quite depressed about my prospects. I was actually quite frustrated. And then I was lucky enough to receive a Sunday Times internship, which was for 2 months, went off to the internship, thought I would get a job at the Sunday Times, spent an amazing 2 months at Sunday Times thinking, I'm going to be this amazing journalist, you know, everything is happening for me. And then there were 3 interns, they chose the other 2. Part of the reason why I didn't get the job is because I didn't have a license, a driver's license. And so that's one thing I would say, please make sure as quickly and as soon as you can after 18, you get your driver's license, because it does determine a lot of opportunities and it can actually stand in the way of that. And so my internship ended. I didn't have a job at the end of it. I was feeling a little bit depressed about my prospects. I had this amazing degree from journalism from Rhodes, which is one of the best places to study journalism, of course. But I was stuck in a way, because I had been so set on journalism being my career that I didn't know what to do. But luckily, I had spent quite a bit of time in the politics department, and I was passionate about politics. I'd always been passionate about politics, but I was more passionate about journalism at this stage. Then the politics department sent me. I had also applied as a backup, because my parents have always been about always have a plan A, plan B, and a plan C. And that's another thing that I want people to make sure they do have a plan A, plan B, and plan C, just in case, because it actually works. So when my plan A failed, which was get into the BJN, then my plan B failed, which was get the job at Sunday Times. Then I took the plan C, which was I had applied for an honors in politics at Rhodes University, and I got into that. And I also managed to get a book. I think there was an ESCOM book bursary, which was a small amount of money, but it was enough to sort of convince me that maybe I should give this politics thing a try, because, well, what else was I going to do anyway? Because I wasn't going to go and sit at home, and I wasn't going to certainly not sit in Joburg without a job and not quite sure what I was going to do. And so I went back to Grahamstown, and now you must imagine going back to a place where I used to study journalism. My friends that I had been in journalism with were now doing the honors degree that I wanted to do, and were pursuing the career that I wanted to pursue. And at this stage, and it's quite an interesting thing looking back now as an older person, but in that time, it really quite felt like my journalism career was over. Like my life was over. Like I didn't even know what I was going to do with this politics thing, but I knew I had to do something, and I knew I had to sort of find a way to connect the journalism and the politics. But the career I had meticulously planned seemed very far from me. So then I went back to Grahamstown. I had to engage with the idea that my former colleagues in journalism were potentially never going to be my colleagues again. And it's quite a weird thing that in Grahamstown, at Rhodes University, the journalism department sits directly opposite. The journalism department and the politics department are opposite each other. And so every time I walked to the politics department, I would walk past the journalism department. Now you can imagine the first few months of doing this, and imagining how I'd had to wave goodbye to this journalism career, and I'd failed even at doing an internship. I mean, really, how much of a failure can you be in life? And so I studied hard, and I worked very hard, because I knew that, you know, this was the career now. I didn't have any other options, right? And so when they said they were looking for tutors, I signed up for a tutorship. My book bursary that I got from ESCOM came with in order to sort of pay back, or to, you know, pay forward, essentially, I had to be a graduate assistant. I helped the department, and I used to help the secretary at the time during lunchtime, just so that she could have a lunchtime as part of the things I had to do. And this is, I'm telling you all of this because every single detail is important, because you don't know when fate is going to knock on your door. So how did I end up knowing about South African Institute of International Affairs and the scholarship? I knew because I was the person that picked up the call, because I was filling in for the secretary. I was the person that got the call when somebody from SAIA who had called through just to, I think, remind the secretary that the applications were going to close soon or something like that. And I was like, what? There's a scholarship? Where? In Joburg? Oh, really? To do what? And they said, there's a scholarship in Johannesburg to study a master's in international relations. I have sent the information through to the secretary. I was like, no, she's not here right now. I am here. Please send me that information because I am interested. And I applied for this. And I was lucky enough to get called in for an interview. And I think the week that I was called in for, so about the same month that I was called in for that interview, my grandmother, who I'd been very close to, was very sick. And I had to leave her in East London to go to Johannesburg to pursue this opportunity. And the last thing she said, one of the last things she said to me, because I didn't know it was the last thing at the time, but one of the last things she said to me was, it's all going to be okay. You just have to trust everything is going to work out. It's all going to be okay. And so by the time I arrived in Joburg, I felt, my grandmother said it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I don't know how she knows it's going to be okay, but it's going to be okay. And so off I went. I went to the interview. I did my best to wow the panelists. And when I came back from the interview, my friend who I was staying with at the time said, I have something to tell you. And I was like, what's going on? And then she proceeded to tell me that my grandmother had actually passed. And so I sat with this for about a week, wondering if I'd gotten the opportunity, but having to go home and deal with the fact that my grandmother had passed. And the last time I saw her, she had said this thing to me, but I didn't know that would be the last thing that she had said to me. And so it was quite a bittersweet moment. But, life happens and you have to move on. And I received news, I think in late December, after we had buried my grandmother, that I had been accepted, that I would be starting on the scholarship. And that was literally the beginning of the career that I have now, I believe. I then went on to spend a year in Johannesburg working as a research intern at SAIA. And it was one of the most amazing opportunities I've ever had because I managed to get an understanding of events management because they make you do a lot of running around and helping with organizing. And it was like frustrating at the time, I won't lie. But it was really good because one of the things I do now in my own company that I own is events management. And I credit SAIA and the work that we had to do there for helping me get started on one of these many careers that I've had. And one of the other things that they did, which was really quite important, is that they constantly invited people who were the leading voices, who were the leading thinkers on any and all things international relations. And one of the other things that they were really good at is that they emphasized the importance and the need of not just studying Europe and all these other countries, but studying South Africa and studying the African continent. And it was through this internship that my love for Africa and my love for African politics and my interest and my passion for African politics was developed. Same with South African politics. And also it was through this internship that I was able to get a deeper understanding of the global economy, how the global economy works. And by the time I finished the internship, I had done the coursework, I had passed the coursework, I still just had the thesis to do. And I was excited. I was sure that by the age of 30, I would have my PhD, I would go to the London School of Economics, and by the age of 40, I would be a diplomat somewhere, I'd be an ambassador, representing my country or something, right? And then life happened. So there I was in Joburg. I'd been sending applications from October up until December, and there was nothing happening. I had to go back to East London because I didn't have a job. And luckily for me, in January, I got a call in January to say I had one of the jobs that I had applied for, which was to be a producer at the SABC at SAFM. I had been accepted for one of those jobs, and I would be starting as soon as I could join. And so in January of, I think it was 2005, I started my first ever media job. And remember, I had already given up on my media career by this stage. I was just applying because, I didn't think I could be a diplomat because I think I'm too much of a straight talker, and I didn't think that people would be comfortable with me saying whatever I thought, however I thought. I felt you needed a little bit more finesse or a little bit more, diplomacy in your speaking, which I didn't think I could deliver, because looking at my personality and looking at the way in which I relate to the world, that career was very attractive, but I didn't think my personality matched as much as would be required. And so I spent about 5 years in media. I worked for SABC, I worked for the FM, I worked for the English News Desk as a bulletin writer, I worked for CNBC Africa as a business reporter and a producer. And then from there, I decided at the age of 26, I wanted a career change. I was done with journalism. I went and I became a brand leader for an American company, where I proceeded to spend 4 months and decided marketing was definitely not the thing for me. And I quit literally with immediate effect after like 4 months, because I just didn't feel it. I was 26 years old. I did not have a penny to my name. I did not have an asset to my name. And I decided I was going to start a company. And so before I quit, I took 100,000 Rand loan from the bank in order to fund this company of mine. I mean, it's hilarious now when I think about it. You know, it's called the bravery of youth. Took this loan, I started a company, and this company was going to be a boutique public relations agency, and I was going to rule the world, and I was going to win R1 million tenders, and nobody would even believe this 26-year-old was doing this stuff. And it was an epic fail of huge proportions. I had to go into debt counseling. I ended up subcontracting and begging friends for jobs. And then an amazing thing happened. I gained a new skill. I had to learn how to do public relations because I had been on the journalism side. And now journalism doesn't make money if you're not a well-known freelancer or anything like that. So I was like, what can I do? I did a literal skills audit. I sat down one day and I said, what are the skills that I have that I can sell? Because I'm not going to get a job tomorrow. And you need to remember that this was happening in 2008, which was the global credit crunch, and nobody was hiring. And of course, nobody told 26-year-old me that you cannot quit your job, your high-paying global job, in the middle of an economic crisis. You know, so for me, though, that 26-year-old taught me so much. I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about resilience. I learned so much about entrepreneurship, and so many things that I never thought were possible became possible because everything was in my hands. I had the power, I had the possibility. And I think also when you don't have a penny to your name, you actually have so much courage because even 20 Rand is a lot of money. And so things that ordinarily you would say, no, I'm not going to do that. You're like, okay, well, I'll give it a try. I mean, I've never been a public relations agent, but you know, I received press releases, so surely I must be able to write one. And so this is what I did. And then after a long time of not getting enough money, actually just feeling like, okay, this is becoming a problem. And obviously my parents having to have quite a number of conversations with me about my career, I then woke up again and I was like, okay, fine, I'll go back and try and get a job. It's fine. So at this point, I hadn't finished that thesis, by the way. It took me 10 years to finish my master's thesis. So I went back to Wits University to try and finish my thesis before my credits expired, because apparently if after 10 years you haven't given your credits expire, went back to go finish this thesis. When I was there, I met up with a friend of mine who said he was looking for a news editor for the Voice of Wits, and my skills fit. So why don't I just come do this for like half a day? Because I also had a daughter at this time. I can do this for half a day. The other half of the day, I can do my studies. I can work on my thesis and stuff. And I said yes, and I did that. And that was such an amazing year of training young people and basically training the next generation of journalists, people who are now some of the best journalists in the world, in South Africa particularly right now. And from that, I then, you know, started developing a passion which I'd always had for academia. And I started lecturing in the Wits journalism course. And then my husband got a job down in Cape Town, and we moved to Cape Town. I worked in media again for a little bit, and then I ended up working at CPUT as an academic. And this was happening at the height of Fees Must Fall. And so I became involved in Fees Must Fall as an academic. I basically started working on decolonizing the curriculum and engaging people on how to decolonize the curriculum and how to build curricula that would work and that would, you know, be understandable for all South Africans. And so through that, I then entered the space of diversity and diversity training and running workshops and that. And so just to wrap up, what do I do now? Right now, I do 100 things. So I'll mention a couple. One is that I'm a media and communications consultant because of that crazy 26-year-old teaching me public relations. And one of the jobs that I hold in that is I do media and communications for Optum South Africa, which is part of a global NGO. I am a diversity trainer. I work with various schools where I'm developing a diverse curriculum in order to help, particularly with challenges around dealing with race, gender, class, sexual orientation, etc. And then I also am a political analyst. I have been one of the official political analysts for the SABC. I've done the State of the Nation on ENCA and many other things, including the research associateship at Sussex, and I've written, academic journals and books and et cetera, et cetera. And the key thing that I want to leave you with before we go to the Q&A is that the path to success is not a straight line. You do not have to have it all figured out. And it is okay to go back to the drawing board every couple of years. And the one key thing I really would like to emphasize is that all students must always do a skills audit. Write down every single skill that you have and figure out how you can make it make money for you so that you never have to rely on one career or rely on one channel. And the way that I would say COVID has affected my career is that, I'm a speaker, I'm a facilitator, I'm a moderator, and I've had to learn how to do this online, and I've had to learn how to replicate the feeling of safety that people get when you moderate and you are in front of them. I've had to learn how to replicate that in an online platform. I've had to learn how to engage audiences from a bedroom, as you can see. And it's been really challenging, but very interesting as well. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Go for it.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Thank you for showing our young participants what they can look forward to as they ascend the academic ladder and hopefully seize the great opportunities that accompany the climb. I'm sure that everyone appreciated your energy and your openness. The major takeaway for me was that careers aren't linear and that they don't necessarily adhere to a strict formula. I also thank you for sharing a very personal and relatable journey with us. I agree that contingencies are vital as one's career takes form, especially during one's time as an early career professional. Thank you. So once again, a huge thank you to our amazing speakers who have all shed so much light on various areas of our discipline and beyond. We will now begin our Q&A segment. If our participants have any questions for a specific speaker or the speakers collectively, please submit them in writing using the Q&A room. The selected questions will then be posed to speakers by me. Please include the name of the speaker or speakers you wish to engage if applicable. For the speakers, if a question is addressed to no specific speaker, you may choose whether you wish to answer or comment on the question or abstain. That being said, any and all engagement is appreciated. Please wait while we collect the questions. Okay, so firstly, this is addressed to all the speakers. What would be your most important piece of advice to students who are interested in the field of IR? Would any of you like to go first? Asanda, would you perhaps like to give some input on this?
So the question is, what is advice for a career in international relations, eh? Well, I mean, I think for me, the key thing is really that you must read and read and read and read some more. And when I talk about reading, I'm not just talking about reading. I'm talking, of course, it's important to read academic texts and to understand international relations theories and to have an academic understanding and grounding in ideologies and philosophies around international relations. But I think also it's important to read and read in terms of novels, because you don't necessarily go to Paris to understand what it feels like to be in Paris and what it means to be Parisian if you have access to books. And so while you're waiting to fund that trip to Paris, read and read and read about the places that you're interested in, about the people that you're interested in, because the more you understand about the world, the better it is, and the more you're going to be able to to show that you have some level of exposure and that you understand how the international system works and how the global economy works. And of course, for me, one of the most critical for any career in politics really is you have to, like, you don't have to love the news. I mean, I love the news, but like you have to read and watch the news regularly because you have to know what's going on. And things change so quickly, from the WTO rules saying you can't do something to them saying you can do it tomorrow. So it's very important that you are up to date with what's happening. You don't have to have an account on Twitter because Twitter can be very toxic, but have an account just to be an observer and a spectator and follow really interested people. So you don't have to engage yourself, but Twitter is a very good source of interesting debates and conversations. And also just like invest in things run it by people who are doing the thing that you want to do. Invest in asking people who are older than you, who have come before you, how they came to be, and also like ask them for advice. How do I want to do this? How do I do this? Don't be scared to ask people for advice, because we all know what it feels like to be sitting there thinking, you'll never be that one thing that you thought you would always be. And sometimes all it takes is just one person who's walked apart to say, actually, no, what you think is a disaster is not that bad.
Thank you so much, Asanda. The next question is, okay. The same question will be addressed to Ghaleeb. Please let me know if you have any input on that.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks to Asanda's comment. I can only but emphasize reading and reading widely. I went, just to give an anecdote, I went over the weekend in search of some text on Japan. Now, what was shocking was to go to one of our best bookshops in the country, and they never had a single book on the shelf on Japan. Now, this is the quality of bookshops in the country. So I'm not a person who enjoys the Kindle and so forth, so I had to order online now. Unfortunately, Amazon doesn't deliver at the moment because of the restrictions. So this poses another challenge to me. Well, a boer maak 'n plan, and so someone has actually found some way to get these books to me. I'm essentially saying that if you want to operate in the international relations / intelligence space, you need to read. And you need to want to be in that other space, which is slightly more cosmopolitan than where you're going to find yourself currently at. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question is for Inka. Which particular science background did you come from? In other words, undergraduate education, and how did your transition into your honors degree? Yes, okay. How did it? Yes, just answer please. What was your undergraduate education and your scientific background, and how did you transition into economics? Sorry, these are taken from our participants. Sorry, Inka, I think your mic is muted. Have you unmuted your mic? Okay, we'll leave that question and move on. Let's see, okay, so I'll direct this, it's a general question. Are there any organizations where one can volunteer in order to gain more experience and practice in the field of IR, as unemployment is rampant in South Africa and many employers desire or want to see experience from potential employees. Okay, could I direct this to you, Mr. Korhonen?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think lots of NGOs and charitable organizations will have various opportunities to volunteer and get some experience, which can be quite helpful, even if the actual direction of that charity is not something that you're interested in. It could be a charity, something like the Guide Dogs for the Blind, even though you're not interested in dogs as such, but getting experience in for example, working in an office space, putting out some pamphlets, something for a donations drive or something like that can be very, very valuable experience. Companies also run internships, of course, from time to time. Unfortunately, and quite shamefully, a lot of companies don't pay interns. I think that's a big travesty. So do try to demand something for your time if you're working for a company rather than volunteering yourself.
Thank you. So the next question is directed.
Can I just supplement that by indicating that there's a very good internship program that government departments are running at all levels. And as I indicated, all government departments have international relations divisions by and large. And so that's one area that you can, go directly to. Second is our institutions are all gearing themselves towards international partnerships. Another, space for them to go and look at opportunities. And then, of course, the private sector and the NGO world. But I think the idea is to get practical experience. And I might want to just say, even if you have to just get there on your own and take your own sandwiches and, not get a stipend, just do it, get that experience first. And you'll sort out things later. But I think the idea is to get experience, yeah.
Thank you for that contribution.
Can I also just add, sorry, I just want to add, having been a very brave 26-year-old, I would say the other thing to think about doing is if you're knocking on the doors and you're trying to volunteer and you've tried everything and nothing is happening, as a young person in South Africa, you have many opportunities. Register a company and do a skills audit and figure out what is it that you can do and do it. And a lot of young people have skills like social media that a lot of older people don't have. And a lot of young people take that skill for granted, but that is a skill that pays salaries, and that it's a multi-million-dollar industry. And so if you're really good at making Instagram stories, that is one way you can make money. If you're really good at doing YouTube videos, that's another way you can make money. So think of any and all possibilities. Don't just confine yourself to the thing that you've studied, and be aware that sometimes what seems like an off-ramp in the wrong direction can actually be a thing that then segues into what it is that you want to do. So as I tried to demonstrate, a career is not linear. So what seems like it has nothing to do with international relations people also need to be on social media, and they need people who are good in social media and have an understanding of international relations. So go with stuff like that, yeah.
Thank you. So let's see. Due to work, so this will be addressed to Ghaleeb if possible. Due to work scarcity and the undervalue of the social sciences in South Africa, graduates tend to struggle to find jobs and thus pursue a PhD or higher education in general. Is there any incentive to only to have master's degrees, and also how can employers see the value in a humanities degree? Sorry about that. Would you like me to ask the question again?
No, it's fine. Thanks. By 2000, we started experiencing a crisis in the humanities in the country, where a large percentage of resources went to the sciences, pure sciences. People thought this was the route, the fact that Enron collapsed wasn't because of the sciences, it was because of the social sciences. People had no ethics. And ethics you don't get necessarily taught in the sciences, but in the social sciences. So with the new government then in 2004, thereabouts, there was this new initiative around strengthening the social sciences and the humanities. Out of the 12,000 students that I spoke about, I would be surprised if there were 2 students doing history as a field of study. Now that's shocking, that there are no historians being developed outside. People want to do MBAs and so forth, and you know. So what the government has eventually done was to resuscitate the humanities, and they've established the institute, the South African Institute for the Humanities. And there's a big program of supporting scholars, master's, PhD levels in this field. So I think that's one concerted attempt at rescuing, the people that brought about change in the country, contrary to popular belief, wasn't your scientists, it was your social scientists. The people that protested was your social scientists, largely. The science guys always went to the laboratory. Tongue-in-cheek about that. No. So the point is that the humanities and social sciences are very important, and that government is putting a lot of resources behind this. The scholarships on offer, the international scholarships that's been granted to academically worthy students have this balance of sciences and social sciences. So we're not only focusing on sending people for training in mathematics and so forth. So there's a lot of opportunities. The NRF has a program that supports emerging scholars. The Department of Higher Education has such a program, etc. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And the final question, are there any opportunities for graduates who have honours degrees in social development at SIRE? So one of our participants has asked this question, and I will give a response in relation to the CAS SIRE intern scholarship. So in order to be accepted as a CAS SIRE intern/scholar, the minimum requirement is that students must have embarked on a master's degree. Information about the internship opportunity and the scholarship, as well as other opportunities offered by SIRE, non-scholarship internships, are available on the SIRE website on www.sire.org.za. Thank you.
There's more questions, there's more questions, there's more questions.
There's a question as well from Chelsea Cohen. My question is on how one gains exposure and experience in the field of IR in South Africa. I find that there are very limited opportunities to gain professional experience, especially in the fields of international security, peace and conflict, and it has forced us to look for experiences outside of South Africa, which is not always feasible. So I guess the concern is more about where we can go to get experience. I would like to direct this to Markus Korhonen.
Yeah, I think, I mean, specifically from the area of the industry that I'm working in, it's true. In South Africa, there aren't that many operators, or at least big operators. It's a very different game if you're in somewhere like London, where you can walk out of one consultancy into another. So it can be tricky. But what I would, there are still some though, and what I would suggest to anybody who's looking into this is to take the time to do some research into these the various companies or whatever it is that you're interested in, and see what the service providers are. They're not necessarily all, and most of them won't be household names, so you won't have heard of them until you really start digging into it a little bit. So it's worth doing that as a first step, and also then to think a little bit about what you'd like to do more specifically, what it is that you're interested in at that moment. So it's much easier to pursue something slightly more narrowed down than to have a vague ambition about, oh, I want to work in the private sector, or I want to work in intelligence. It's much more difficult than to kind of focus what it is that you try and find. So it's worth just as the other commentators were saying, to read, to read a little bit about the industry that you're generally interested in, get a sense of what sort of opportunities are available. And then as a last point, I would suggest buy someone coffee, or call somebody on Zoom. Have a conversation with somebody who works in that industry. Most people are happy to talk about themselves. We're all here to do that, for instance. So get in touch with them on LinkedIn and ask if you can have a kind of virtual coffee with them. Most people are very happy to try and help you out, to direct you to, even if your organization isn't hiring, to direct you to other organizations who might be, and just let you know a little bit more about what's going on in that sector that they know about. I think that's probably true for most people.
Thank you, Markus. I was wondering if Inka would like to comment at all on that, if your microphone is working.
I hope so. Yeah, so 80% of the people that I manage and have hired have been through these conversations. Another thing to remember is that big institutions often rely on local companies and expertise to deliver their work. So for instance, in work that I'm doing in Burundi, I will work with local think tanks, organizations that are on the ground, although in Burundi, there are not many of those on the ground right now. Anyway, so just to say that it might not be something that companies advertise, but they're really delivering those services for international development agencies, etc. The African Development Bank is active in the region, and they know that South Africa has good university, lots of talent, is easy, well, used to be easy to access the region, etc., and is quite cost competitive for the skills level that is available. So I agree. And just earlier, I'd also wanted to mention that curiosity, I think, is for me the most important thing in a field in international development and international relations. You have to be curious and you have to listen to other people. They are going to know their country and their context and their environments best. And you're coming in and you kind of have to form that relationship with them. So yeah, once you've read all those books, rely on your instinct and your curiosity to form a relationship.
Thank you so much for that. The next question is addressed to Asanda and Ngoasheng. Any advice for journalism students wishing to branch off into international relations? How do the two relate, and what steps can one take to use their journalism degree in IR?
Sure, I feel like that's an exam question or a thesis right there, but I'll try and respond to it. So a few things. One is that I don't think it's possible for any journalist to cover any news on any topic without understanding the global economy and how the global economy works, without understanding the local economy and how the local economy works. So one of the things that becomes important when you are a journalist is to read widely and to understand a lot of issues. What studying international relations in particular does is that it opens up your mind to an understanding of the local, the regional, and the global picture. And I think once you have that, then you have a higher chance of actually getting employed. So for example, when I started at SAFM, my colleagues told me that one of the reasons I was hired is because in the interview, I spoke a lot about Somalia and my passion for Sudan, which are countries that a lot of people don't know about. And because I spoke a lot about my passion for the whole continent of Africa and was able to provide quite specific answers, I was able to get the job because a lot of South Africans don't know enough about the continent, and a lot of South Africans don't understand enough about the politics across the board of the continent. And so somebody who is able to give quite detailed information about the continent and about the politics of the continent stands a much better chance than any other candidate. And then I think also the other thing that's not necessarily related to journalism or international relations, but just in general, is that one of the questions that scare a lot of people in an interview is, tell us about a moment in which you've faced a challenge, or one of those questions. And a lot of the time, young people, because they don't have work experience in the main, or they do, but it's not that deep, they struggle with this question. And so my advice is that when you approach interviews with the understanding and the knowledge that the person on the other end is a human being just like you. They react to things just like you, and seek in the interview to cultivate an engagement and to cultivate a conversation with the person on the other end. And I think that once you present yourself as a human being who, you know, has experiences and has survived certain challenges, you are able to give the person who's interviewing you a more rounded perspective on who you are. Because to get to the interview seat, you need to have a CV that says you are worthy of this job. And so once you're able to demonstrate that not only are you worthy of this job in terms of qualification, but also your personality and your character and your characteristics, particularly in journalism, particularly international relations, it requires quite an outgoing person. But even if you're not necessarily an outgoing person, but it requires somebody who can show, as was already said, that you are a curious person and that you care about the world and that you care about, you know, the happenings of the world. And so that's just the one bit of advice I wanted to give, that don't be scared of the people on the other side, and understand that they are human and they are, you know, really just like you. And that's why in part I presented my piece in the way that I presented it, because I wanted people to understand that there's nothing wrong with having conversation style discussions at any level.
Thank you so much, Asanda. We're moving on now to our final question, which is addressed to all, and I would like to start with Markus Korhonen. So to all, how would you recommend finding and reaching out to mentors in the politics field?
I think reaching out is quite straightforward. Drop them a line, send them an email, say what you're kind of interested in getting from that relationship, and then see if they have the time to help you out. I mean, it's not that difficult. I think, you know, like I said previously, I think that most people would be flattered to be thought of as a mentor. In terms of finding them, I think that's kind of up to you, because what you want to try and figure, you know, unless there's some sort of a program that you're going through, you need to try and kind of figure out what it is that you're hoping to get from that mentor, what it is you're hoping to get from that relationship. Yeah, I'd say give it some thought. Think about the people you've come across. Obviously, it doesn't make sense for your mentor to be necessarily a complete stranger, you know. So you can also get introduced to people, you know, through a mutual connection, who might see that there's a kind of worthwhile relationship to be developed there.
Would any other speaker like to comment? Perhaps Inka? Sorry, Inka, I think you're muted.
I give up.
Oh no.
Am I back?
We can hear you. Yeah.
I'm in New Zealand, so it is very far, and they don't have good internet here. So anyway, mentorship is important. It's probably go for someone that you really admire and think you could learn a lot from, but be cognizant that you need to also put effort into the content. You need to have regular follow-up, and yeah, these people are busy. So just kind of target what you need from them. But as you progress in your career, sponsorship, we do a lot of research around this, and women have less powerful or less sponsors in their career to put them forward for shortlists or endorse them for their career progression. So something to look out for. And then also professional associations and networks. You know, sometimes peers are actually you know, the right level for thinking through, you know, doing those lists of those skill sets, etc. So trying to find those both in the country and then internationally. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Inka. Yes, please, Asanda, if you have something, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think, as has already been said, but to emphasize that when you do reach out, know what you want to say, know why you're approaching that particular person, and know what it is, and be clear to them what it is that you want to get out of any relationship. And I think also it's important for people to understand that every single person you meet is a potential mentor and a potential sponsor. And so cultivate good relationships. So I'm a person that can that doesn't necessarily believe that you should never burn a bridge, because sometimes people can be toxic, but take care and think about any bridge that you're about to burn, because you need people in the future. There are many people that I met when I was way younger who to this day still send me messages when there's consultancies or when people are looking for people who do the kind of work that I do. There are many academics and lecturers who taught me 20 years ago who still send me inboxes with consultancies, etc., etc. So cultivate good relationships and maintain those relationships. And please, please, please do not inbox people on Facebook saying hi. It just doesn't work. So unless you're gonna say, hi, my name is, and this is what I want, don't do it. So try, particularly LinkedIn is a very good place because people are expecting work sort of based things. On Facebook, it can get a little bit personal, but you can also try Facebook, but please have a comprehensive reason for why you're reaching out and what it is that you want. And also just definitely do a lot of reading up as well on the person, because you don't want to ask for somebody to mentor you to become, I don't know, a gender expert when this person only focuses on security and is actually quite male-oriented in their approach to thinking about security. So make sure that the person that you're approaching is going to be a good match for you, and make sure that it's somebody that can teach you not only about the subject matter, but can also teach you about, what it means to be a woman. And so if you're a woman, try get a female mentor if you can. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the male mentor if that's what you can get, but try get a female mentor. If you're a Black person, a Black woman particularly, try and get a Black woman mentor, because they'll be able to talk to you about who you are and what it means to be in the body that you're in, and how you can succeed in the career path that you're in beyond just the sort of content or the industry stuff. They'll be able to tell you some of the stumbling blocks that you'll face and how to overcome those challenges. And that becomes quite important when you're building a career, because you can be a PhD student, or you can have all the great marks in the world and have everything that you need in the world, but because you're Black or because you're a woman, there's certain stumbling blocks, and if you don't understand how to navigate those, you will not get the kind of success that you want.
Thank you, Asanda. So excellent. That concludes our Q&A round. I just want to thank you all for giving so much actionable advice and for answering our participants' questions so carefully and so fully. We'll now hear Saya's vote of thanks from the chair of our Western Cape branch, Sheila Camera. This will be followed by CAS's vote of thanks, given by CAS project manager, Moritz Sprenker. Thank you.
As chair of the Western Cape branch of SIRE, it's my privilege to thank you all for embracing the new normal and creating an interesting virtual platform for what is a key annual activity for our branch. In other words, showcasing potential careers for students. I'm also glad to say it was the first of 2 seminars, so you will get a second bite of the cherry on the 17th of July, where the focus will be on adjusting to careers in the new normal. While the COVID-19 lockdown at first focused on health and then on economic issues, as the lockdown has eased and the consequences of it have come under the spotlight, so an examination of the importance of social services and humanitarian research seems apposite at this time. A big thank you to the international group of speakers for sharing their experience in these fields and demonstrating their importance. Also, thanks to our moderator, Matthew Wannenberg, and Mistress of Ceremonies, Alia Vyers. Last but not least, a big thank you to our partners, our regular partners and sponsors, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. We look forward to seeing you at the next one. It's my privilege.
Okay, Can you hear me? Perfect. Okay. So hello, everybody. My name is Moritz Brenker, and I'm talking today on the behalf of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung South Africa. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to our 4 panel speakers, Ghaleeb, Jeppie, Markus, Korhonen, Asanda, Ngoasheng, and Inka Schomer. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with our audience today. More so, you have reserved time out of your schedules to ensure that we have a very fruitful and enjoyable discussion. I believe it was just as exhilarating to our listeners to see how rich and multifaceted the work in international affairs can be as it was for me. I wish to extend our gratitude on behalf of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung to all the national and international exhibitors that were present today. By providing your information, all our listeners got an essential and valuable overview which will support and hopefully also impact their career trajectories beyond this event. For more than 20 years, we as CAS are continuously supporting young and talented students in South Africa and across the African continent. Every year, it is a great pleasure to guide the path of young and motivated scholars and witness their growth in both professional and personal capacities. I would also like to say a very, very big thank you to our current Cape Town scholars, Aliyah and Matthew. It takes a lot of time and planning to set up such an event. You both have mastered this very well and perfectly guided us through today's event. Thank you, Pippa from SIRE Western Cape, for assisting us as well. Last but certainly not least, I would like to express my gratitude to all of you who have joined us today. This event wouldn't have been possible without your interest and keenness to learn. This was our first virtual careers event, and we can safely say that it was a great success. Again, we are genuinely grateful for all the participants. To close, there's a reminder. Please do not forget to follow us on social media to always stay tuned on our work. And the second reminder is that this was just the first edition of our careers event. Next Friday, the 17th of July, the Joburg edition will take place. Further details and registration links will be published on our social media platforms by Monday. Despite the ongoing pandemic, I wish you all a good weekend, stay safe, and hopefully see you all very soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Moritz. We really appreciate the vote of thanks. And with that,
reached its end for the day. On behalf of the organizing teams here in Cape Town at SIRE and CAS, thank you to our distinguished speakers for sharing their insights and experiences with us today. And then to our hundreds of participants, we hope that this afternoon has encouraged you to further envision your future career paths, no matter the field. As such, I thank you for your participation. Please don't forget to click on the link in the sticky notes section in the comments to participate in our very exciting competition where you stand a chance to win sought after academic works. To all participants, on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see an offers tab in which you can click on a link to get all information from exhibitors on opportunities, networks, and work experience opportunities for social science and humanities graduates. Again, as Moritz said, please keep an eye out on CAS and SIRE social media channels this week, as we'll be advertising our second virtual careers event hosted by our colleagues at CAS and SIRE Johannesburg offices for next week, Friday. So yeah, that's all from our side. Thank you very much for participating. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
My name is Henning Suhr and I'm the current country director of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung in South Africa. The Konrad Adenauer Stiftung is providing scholarships.
The CAS-SIRE Scholarship was established in 1999. It creates the opportunity for young postgraduate students doing their master's degree to gain, apart from a degree, a postgraduate degree, also professional experience working in the South African Institute of International Affairs.
At the moment, we are financing 10 scholarships to gifted South African and other African students in South Africa, and half of them we are providing via the CAS-SAIA scholarship program.
Over the last 20 years, some of our CAS-SAIA scholars have gone on to jobs in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, the Department of Trade and Industry, the South African Presidency. They've gone into the private sector.
Being accepted into the CAS-SAIA scholarship program meant that I had been acknowledged as a person, as an individual, that I had something relevant to say, to offer to the world.
Through the scholarship program, I've been able to not only pursue my master's program, but also get the required corporate experience that is needed.
Your time at SAIA will ultimately be what you make of it. So confront the challenges boldly and take this time to learn as much as you can from others and also about yourself.
I've had the opportunity to travel to Botswana and engage the civil society regarding the APRM, which is the African Peer Review Mechanism.
I've been able to contribute to policy insights on topical issues such as climate finance, investment in infrastructures and impetus for development, as well as on the recent COVID-19 pandemic.
I've been involved in work concerning the African Continental Free Trade Area. I've been exposed to research work that I never thought was possible for me.
I learned that the role of the civil society is not to indict the government, but to work with the government in ensuring that the government does what it's supposed to do in promoting the well-being of its citizens.
Overall, the scholarship program has given me a chance to develop in my personal and professional capacity.
I've learned to adapt, and I've also learned to multitask.
As an intern, you will be expected to conduct independent research and produce various research publications. Start with something that is of interest to you and write about that. Believe in yourself and believe in what you write.
It also gives you financial stability. You get paid to do what you love to do.
The scholarship does not only offer you a stipend, it also offers you support with regards to your studies.
This CAS-SAIA scholarship program gives you an opportunity to gain financial independence as it comes with a stipend that you can use to sustain yourself whilst pursuing your studies and working at SAIA.
Be open to many new experiences and learning at SAIA.